we should be live.
All right, thank you, Aria. We'll go ahead and start with a roll call, and then if any people join us in progress, we'll just add them to the meeting minutes as attending. So I'll start. Tim Stroshine, I am here. Aria.
Present.
All right, we also have Steve.
Present.
Deanna.
Present.
And Jean.
Present.
All right, that's all that I see on my screen. Did I miss anybody? I will take that as a no. So with that, our first item would be to approve the meeting minutes from the last meeting, the December meeting. So we talked about the Metropolitan Transportation Plan project list. That was one of the big items, as well as a couple other things in the questions, comments, and suggestions section here. So I would entertain a motion to approve these minutes.
So moved. This is Deanna. I move that the minutes be approved with the necessary corrections.
Okay, thank you, Deanna. And
And I'll
can I get a second? And thank you, Steve.
This is Steve.
Yes, thank you, Steve. And then I guess we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote, even though we only have a couple people. Tim Stroshine, I approve. Steve.
Approve.
Deanna.
Approve.
And Jean.
Approve.
All right, very good, thank you. So kind of the big item for today's meeting is giving you guys an update about our Metropolitan Transportation Plan and where that's been since the last time we met. So I have a PowerPoint here. So hopefully that's showing up on everybody's screen. Good, okay, there we go. Looks like I'm seeing it. So is everybody seeing this okay?
Yes.
Good, good. Okay. So basically, before I really get too much into this, I would like to kind of just give you a quick overview of our timeline for what this looks like. So we do need to have this adopted by the end of the fiscal year, so by the end of June. So what that means is we're going to kind of need to start the adoption process at our May meeting so that we can get approval from our committees in order so that we can get it adopted into the comprehensive plan at the June APC meeting. So we were kind of pretty fast approaching that. And so here are kind of some of the big things that I wanted to highlight, and I'm gonna kind of pause after every slide to give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions. Before that, it does look like someone joined us. So just for the record, the person that just joined, could I get your name, please? All right, well, I'm not hearing anything, so we'll just move on and hopefully see if any technical difficulties that person has are getting sorted out. But back to the slideshow. So the first thing we have is kind of talking about some of the major significant sections that we have. So this plan touches on a variety of different topics. So one of them, of course, is transit. Certainly we partnered with City Bus on this. We have kind of put together a summary of some of the different services they provide and kind of how some of their routes operate, some of the things they're looking at changing, some of the investments that they are looking at putting into place, those sorts of things. So for that section, we have completed that and we had City Bus review it and they signed off on it. So that's ready to go. Another big section, which is a pretty big change for us as compared to previous plans, is that we've included an environmental resilience and sustainability section. So this is something that we feel hasn't been appropriately necessarily addressed in previous plans. It was kind of mentioned, but there weren't enough specifics given as to what sorts of things we need to be doing to improve that in our community. So we really worked for this plan on getting that kind of increased and really get a lot more information about steps that we can take and what needs to be done in order to make our community more sustainable and resilient. So the draft of that section is almost complete. We're anticipating it to be done by next week. That is our kind of our rough timeline. So that section is moving along very well. So we're glad to see that. And then additionally, we also have a safety section. So this kind of covers things like some of the crashes that might be happening, and that will have some breakdown and some information about just what's going on with how we're trying to work to make the whole transportation network safer for everyone in the community. So that would, of course, include not only people that are driving in their cars, but also people that are walking, people that are bicycling, those sorts of things. So those are some of the significant sections that we're working on that, as you can see, some of the drafts for those are almost done, or almost done. So we've got a pretty good handle on that, and we will kind of be distributing some more information about this, which I will discuss a little bit later in the presentation. But I did want to pause and give people a chance to ask questions if they had any.
Will you be having sidewalks?
Yes, we do.
What will the tree lawns width be?
Yeah, okay, so that's a very good question. So that is not something that is covered in this plan. That is something that is going to be up to local jurisdiction. So whatever standards local jurisdiction has will govern that. So the city of West Lafayette.
Standards are not good in this area. They need to be a minimum 6 feet for mature trees if you're talking about sustainability and environmental effects. Anything less than that is worthless.
Yes, so that is something, like I said, that is covered by other documents, but that is a very good point. Thank you for raising that, and that is something that we have looked at in other plans, and I believe we have, what sticks in my mind is, as some of the numbers we talked about are 6 to 7.5 feet for those, but I'm not sure. Again, that's
Your property
kind of,
values go up too. The wider the tree lawn, the higher the property value.
yes, that's a good point. Thank you. So again, that's some conversations we have had, and I agree that's a good point. It's just something that's a little too detailed for the specifics of this plan. This is more of an overview of transportation. Okay, any other questions about some of these sections?
Nothing on YouTube or Facebook.
Okay, thank you for checking on that, Arya. All right, we will go ahead and move on to the next slide then. Okay, so a transportation project survey. So this is something that we distributed to the public, and we kind of asked for their feedback about several different topics. So basically the primary focus of this was to look at different types of transportation, different methods of transportation, and what sorts of areas could be done in order to enhance transportation kind of for that mode in the community. So the questions were very open-ended. They asked for respondents to manually type in some comments. So as such, we got just a lot of different types of comments. So we got some comments that were kind of very brief and highlighting a certain area of the community. They might just mention a road or an intersection that was problematic. And then we got some other comments that went into quite specific detail about some of the issues that they were encountering in our community. And so all of those comments were kind of logged, and they are included in appendices in our plan. So they will be in the final plan as a matter of record. And so I do note here that we did receive 243 total responses for this 9-question survey. I did want to mention that out of those 243 responses, not everyone necessarily answered every question. Some people that responded only had perhaps something specific they were interested in, so they might have only responded to a few of the questions, whereas other people did respond to all of them. And some people, as their response to questions, just marked that they did not have any feedback in this area, but we did record that again as a matter of record. So the 4 areas that we asked about are how we can get projects for roads, how we can get projects for transit, specifically shelters and other transit amenities, trails and trail projects, as well as sidewalks and bicycle lanes. So those are the 4 different areas that we kind of focused on getting feedback on. So again, I will pause and take this opportunity to ask if there are any questions about this project survey. All right, I'm not hearing any questions. I will go into a little more detail about some of these elements in my next few slides. So if that sparks any questions, please feel free to go ahead and ask. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start with some of the feedback that we got for the roads part of the survey. So one of the types of suggestions we got, just kind of as a general categorization, would be suggestions on roads or intersections that people felt had a lot of congestion. So, you know, problems where you might have to wait for a long time, not even necessarily during the rush hour type of times a day, but maybe just during any time of the day. So South and Creasy was one example of an intersection that was highlighted by several respondents. And I think if you've ever driven that, especially you know, around 5 o'clock on a weekday, you've definitely experienced what's going on there. So that was something that we were definitely expecting. But you know, something that we certainly got feedback on, and there were others. That was one I just picked out that I thought would kind of be a easy example to mention here tonight. Another type of suggestion we got was suggestions about new roads. So particularly what we saw was suggestions about converting gravel roads to paved roads. So there were some people that felt that certain roads that have been gravel roads for a while, maybe they have kind of elevated themselves to a level where it might be more appropriate to have a paved surface. And as such, that was suggested that we convert those roads from gravel roads to paved roads. So that was another example of some of the types of suggestions we got as far as adding some new roads to the transportation network, so to speak. And then we also did get suggestions on road maintenance. So these types of suggestions in particular kind of focused on roads with surface issues. So there might be, you know, cracking, potholes, wear and tear, et cetera, poor shoulders, those types of issues that people see. So Soldiers Home Road was one commonly cited example that kind of fell under this category. So people were looking at some pavement repair on certain segments of that. So those are some of the types of feedback that we got, and I would say that most of this stuff was fairly expected. It wasn't like there was anything that people suggested that necessarily caught us out of left field. So this was more of an exercise of kind of confirming what we already knew. But it is always very good to get some feedback from the public and kind of have them share their perspective. It's a little dangerous sometimes as planners and engineers to, you know, get caught up in our own world and our own simulations and models and our own data and totally neglect what the public is experiencing as they travel around the network. So it's good to have both of those elements kind of combined together. So again, I'll go ahead and pause, and if there are any questions about any of these items, please feel free to go ahead and speak up now.
I do have a question. With the oil difficulty with Russia right now, and with trying to pave gravel roads with asphalt, which is an oil base, and are you trying to increase urban sprawl at the expense of the environment?
No, we are not trying to increase urban sprawl, especially because as the Area Plan Commission, we also handle the current planning and comprehensive planning as well. I would say over the years, our general philosophy has been very much to try to keep development to certain areas where we feel we can get appropriate service to it. And one of the primary ways that we've done that is by disallowing subdivisions on septic tank. So we insist that sewer and that type of infrastructure would be available before we allow big development out in areas that are served by septic. So we would have to have sewer service, sanitary sewer service, in order to get that going. So that kind of is one of the biggest tools that we've used to allow us to kind of regulate and plan for development.
Sounds good.
Okay, there's a question on Facebook. George Biddles asks, were there any suggestions about the area of Harrison High School, Burnett Creek Elementary, and Battleground Middle School? Specifically, 600 North at 50 West, and the increased housing subdivisions currently being built and engineered.
Yes, that's a very good question. So we did get some comments about roads in that area, specifically both 500 and 600 North, I remember. So that was one area that was identified, and we do kind of have some project plans in the works for that. So we do kind of expect that within the next several years, we'll kind of get some improvements up in that area. That will hopefully kind of mitigate some of the issues from the increased development that I believe this question is kind of referencing, yes.
Okay. That looks like all the questions for now.
Okay, very good. Thank you for sharing that question from our stream. We'll go ahead and move on to the next project, or excuse me, the next type of project feedback that we got. So that was about transit projects. So this really focused on bus shelters and amenities for people riding the bus. So this wasn't necessarily about, where we should have bus routes or that sort of thing. That's something that was not covered in the survey. It was mostly just about the amenities at bus stops. So one of the biggest things we actually got from asking for feedback about this was just kind of a general call for more stops to have shelters and amenities. It seemed like there was a very clear desire for people to be able to have a space there where they could wait for the bus, and especially be able to sit down and make sure that the buses were accessible to folks with mobility challenges, so people who are in wheelchairs, those sorts of things. So feedback like that, we got a lot of good feedback about that. Additionally, we did get some suggestions for specific locations where people thought that shelters would be really beneficial. So South Street is kind of my example of the type of feedback that we got for that. We heard that those shelters or those stops are lacking shelters, and several respondents really felt that those stops would really benefit from having shelters, especially with all the kind of commercial development in that area. Obviously, people want to get out there. There are people that work there, as well as people that shop or eat or whatnot, patronize some of the other types of businesses that they have out there. So we got some good feedback on that, and that's something that, just as kind of a sidebar, we are working with City Bus on kind of getting more shelters and amenities in place. We've secured some federal funding for them to be able to build some shelters. So they're kind of in the process of working through what locations might be beneficial. So they've kind of done some studies where they've looked at ridership in certain areas, and as well as how much it would cost to improve some of the stops, and kind of combined that analysis into putting together a list of locations that they would like to install these amenities at. One thing that kind of has delayed that a little bit is they did have some significant staff turnover recently. So with that, they've kind of been playing catch up, but they are getting back to looking at that and moving that process forward. We do have a staff member at our office who works closely with them. He regularly attends their staff meetings that they hold, their weekly staff meetings. And so he's been coordinating with them on that effort. So with that, I think that's all that I had to mention about this slide, but I would again pause for questions.
I might add, they need to have a trash can with those bus stops, or have a trash can on the bus so people can put their trash in the receptacle rather than leave it on the ground.
Yes, that's a good point. Thank you.
Even if they let the person ride free by filling the trash can with trash around the bus stop, would be a benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. Did we have any other questions or anything coming from the stream online?
do not see any more comments from streams at this time.
Okay, thank you. We will go ahead and move on to our next item there. So this is kind of the next category of feedback we got, which was about trails. So as kind of a general suggestion, one example of those types of suggestions that we got was that people are really interested in having more trail connectivity so that they can take longer trips on trails. So right now it seems that many people feel that they can get part of the way to where they want to go on a trail, but then that amenity kind of ends, and if they want to get to their final destination, wherever that might be, then they kind of have to get off the trail and they might have to ride on the street or on a bike lane or the sidewalk, or they don't have quite the same level of dedicated infrastructure to take their trip on. So because of that, people are really interested in getting more connectivity, especially to shopping centers and those types of places. So kind of just continuing to improve and expand the trail network. That was a big suggestion that we got in general. We also got some suggestions on trail maintenance. So this would be things like making sure that snow removal happens during winter months. I guess we kind of all experienced that recently, as well as making sure that places, the pavement is maintained in certain places. There are certain spots where the trail surface might have worn away, especially again, as it relates to some of the winter storms that we had, or even just in heavy rain events. So kind of making sure that the trails are appropriately cared for. So we got some suggestions about that. Happy Hollow Trail was one example that showed up a few times in the feedback, as well as suggestions on locations for new trails. So in addition to kind of the connectivity piece that I mentioned earlier, people were also very interested in trails near parks. So that does include not only the state park that we have up by Battleground, but also just parks in general. So we kind of got some feedback about both of those types of things being needs, which makes a lot of sense. Obviously, having trails so that people can use for recreation, especially with families or young children, is a huge benefit to the community. So seeing that is certainly something that we expected. So that is some of what we saw as feedback in regards to trails. So again, I'll go ahead and pause for any questions.
I have a question. This is Deanna.
Yeah, go ahead, Deanna.
Thanks. With the connectivity of the trail, I take it this would be Lafayette and West Lafayette?
Mostly, yes. That's
Okay.
where we got a lot of our feedback. I will say, just because this was feedback that was open-ended, we are relying on what people typed into the survey.
Right.
So there were some comments that were just more trails or things like that, or trails need to connect better. So those types of feedback weren't as specific. That was kind of why I lumped it under the general category. But we did get some specific requests about
Well,
certain questions.
let me ask the question now. My question is there a collateral burden on like utilities, police, security, when you connect those trails? Like, does that increase the risk of, I don't know, dealing drugs, people sleeping in the areas, being that, once you build them and you connect them, then, it makes it easier to get in and out and around. So I would think there would be more traffic during the daylight hours and at night. So is there like collateral impact on different departments other than just for, the roads themselves?
Yes, so that's a very good question. That is something that people often are interested in, to wonder if a trail comes in, will that impact safety in my area, kind of thing, or that is a common concern. I would say that there hasn't really been any evidence that trails increase crime or things like that. Those sorts of things are more a function of other factors. So, you know, some of the general other things that might lead to increased crime are much more so the culprit than anything that a trail would do.
Okay.
Now, particularly one thing that is good to have just as general practice is to keep trails well lit.
Right.
Obviously, if you have that, you know, that's a benefit for many reasons. It, you know, keeps people safe. Especially at crossings, you know, there can be incidents when trails are crossing the road. If there's poor lighting, a vehicle just might not see someone using a trail, and there's always a danger of a crash there, which of course can be very, very devastating.
Right.
So proper trail lighting and maintenance can really mitigate some of those types of problems.
Okay. So yeah, I you know, that's something that people may not necessarily think about, but like you said, it's, you know, it comes part and parcel. You actually connect the roads. And I've seen instances, right? Currently, I'm sitting in Atlanta and they have the belt line that connects. It's a walkway and a roadway for bicycles and scooters. And now they have to do traffic control to keep the bicycles on one side and the scooters on one side and the people on the other side. And they have to keep it well lit. But that also encourages vagrants because there's somewhere now that's well lit. You know, so
You might
I'm
want
just
to
wondering
include,
how you take that into account.
you might want to include park rangers on bicycles.
Yeah, something like that would be good because it would be friendly to the walkway as opposed to.
Yeah, and to be effective trail, it has to be landscaped well.
Yep. Thanks. That was it for me.
Okay, yes, thank you. Those were some very good points. So we appreciate the discussion on that. Does anybody else have any questions that you'd like to bring up?
Yeah, this is Gene. On trail maintenance, just like sidewalks, if the trails or sidewalks are too close to the street, the snow plow piles the snow on them. It's kind of a battle between the two to clear them off. There ought to be a way to either not put the trails close to the roads or figure out a way to remove the snow. And then the same is somewhat true of piles of leaves in bike lanes and also trash cans in bike lanes as to how they should be handled.
Yes, that's an excellent point, Gene. Thank you. So I think one thing that definitely helps a little bit with that is kind of using the tree lawn space as a buffer. So of course, we talked earlier about the width of the tree lawn that was mentioned in one of the earlier comments. So that's, again, the type of thing that if you have that sort of space, that can act as a bit of a natural buffer between a trail and the road, and lead to increased safety, as well as, of course, the benefits for the trees to be able to properly grow and spread their roots out and do all those important things the trees need to do. So yeah, that's kind of another type of benefit of proper planning for that sort of thing. And again, that is addressed in some other documentation that's not explicitly covered in this plan because that level of detail is a little too fine for this specific plan. But it is the sort of thing that we have been making an increased effort as an office to coordinate with our local jurisdictions about.
Okay, a comment here from Facebook. George Biddles says, good response on the trail lighting. Solar crossing lights are a good option, e.g. Salisbury, north of Calbrer.
Yes, thank you. And we have also seen those types of technologies be implemented very successfully in other areas. There are a few here, but it is something that we do actually mention a little bit in the plan, specifically that type of technology. So, but a very good point. Thank you. Okay, I think that was all the questions. Did I miss any? I want to make sure I don't miss anybody's comments.
That is all that I have at this time.
Okay, thank you, Aria. All right, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next item. So sidewalks and bicycle lanes was another category of feedback that we got. So again, we did get some general suggestions. So one of the general suggestions we got that I would like to address as just an example of some of the feedback we got was that bicycle lanes may not be effective in all cases. If the bicycle lanes are not an appropriate width and the travel lanes for vehicles are not an appropriate width, it may not actually be that much safer for cyclists to be able to ride in those bike lanes, as well as how well they're marked, what kind of signage there is. So there are a lot of issues that you have to do. It's not just as simple as putting some paint on the ground and thinking that will protect cyclists. It's something that you really need to, properly have those marked and really call attention to those and make sure that, drivers are aware that cyclists do have a right to use the roadway as well. And that there are appropriate ways that we can safely provide for different types of users on our transportation network. So that was one of the types of comments we got, which was, I thought, a very good comment. So I thought that would be a good one to highlight as an example. Another type of comment we got, we did get some suggestions on sidewalk maintenance. So one example we got was talking about tree roots getting under the sidewalk and pushing up some of the panels of the sidewalk, creating trip hazards and uneven sidewalks, those sorts of things, which are obviously a big hazard to people with mobility challenges. It is very important when we design sidewalks and maintain them to make sure that proper accessibility ramps are included, but that doesn't matter if someone can't get to the ramp using the sidewalk. So again, this is kind of something where long-term thing is important, and it's important to make sure that trees have enough space to grow and that we are thinking ahead in our design so that the trees can have space to expand their roots without getting too much into the sidewalk and causing some of these other issues, because we're kind of going a little bit backwards if we just say, oh, well, we'll remove all the trees, then we are maybe solving one problem but creating another. So that's not what we want to do. We don't want to go sideways like that. We want to make sure that we're providing appropriate space for both trees and foliage and that type of natural plantings that are very important, as well as having good space for pedestrians so that they can get around safely, especially those with mobility challenges. And then we also, another type of suggestion that we got in this vein was talking about specific locations for improved sidewalks. So Soldiers Home Road was one where there were some segments of that were called out as potentially having sidewalks that weren't of very good quality, that needed to perhaps be looked at, especially getting redone. So there might be sidewalks in place, but they're not wide enough, or they're in very poor condition, or those sorts of things. And it wasn't just Soldiers Home Road. Again, that's just one example that I cherry picked out that I thought might be a well-known example since it's a significant road in the community. Okay, so are there any questions about some of the feedback we got on sidewalks and bike lanes?
My name is Larry Rose. I might add on your sidewalk maintenance, you need to increase your code. You can't put a 4-inch concrete slab on clay and not expect it to move. Put some rebarb in that sidewalk and you won't have to worry about tree roots raising it.
Thank you, Larry. That's a good point.
I'm not seeing anything on Facebook or YouTube at this time.
All right. Okay. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next item then. So from all of that, plus some other work that we've done, we've been working on generating some what we call project lists. So there are a couple different ways that we sorted through this. So we did sort by different types of projects. So highway projects, transit projects, bicycle pedestrian projects. So you can lump, the trails and sidewalks under bicycle pedestrian. I kind of combined them just to make this slide not too busy, hopefully. As well as we sorted by the sponsoring jurisdiction for the project. So we had what we would call the local jurisdictions. So that would be, you know, Lafayette, West Lafayette, Tippecanoe County, as well as the small towns. So those all got a chance to put in some potential future projects. The Indiana Department of Transportation, as well as another jurisdiction that could potentially sponsor projects. We have always included their projects in our plan, even though we ourselves don't have direct feedback on how those get designed. You know, some of those decisions are made by the state. But for complete information, again, so the public knows, we do identify those projects, as well as projects for City Bus. So City Bus, a lot of their projects are maybe a little bit different. So the types of projects we include are often things like what you might call sort of routine things that they do. So obviously they have to replace their buses. You know, buses don't last forever. And of course, with City Bus specifically, they've really been moving to compressed natural gas as a type of fuel that they use for their bus fleet. So that requires some additional fueling infrastructure, refueling infrastructure, so that they can make sure that those buses stay running, as well as just generally converting the fleet from the older diesel with all the emissions and stuff to the cleaner burning CNG buses, which apparently I've been told they also find that the CNG buses are pretty good in terms of maintenance and how easy it is to perform maintenance on them. I guess there are some models of buses that have certain design challenges in performing maintenance on them, but the type of CNG buses that City Bus use, I've been told that their mechanics are pretty happy with how those work. So it sounds like it's something that's really been a beneficial strategy for them to really focus on converting the fleet to that type of bus. So as such, that does of course require, again, some financial investment. So that is another type of thing that's included in there, as well as some of their routine funds that they receive. Okay, so any questions about this? I'm going to cover this a little more in future slides, but I'll go ahead and pause here and see if anyone does have questions about this. Okay, it sounds like maybe we don't have anything, so I can go ahead and move on to the next slide, I think.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for checking the stream, Aria. All right, so first of all, talking about the local project lists. So how we developed these. So in addition to getting the feedback from the surveys that I mentioned earlier, we also worked with the local government engineers. And one of the reasons why that's significant is because that helps us to identify specific project limits. So we're looking at, you know, point A to point B, and, you know, also getting a cost estimate for that, which of course has been a bit of a challenge recently with kind of the supply chain stress that we've seen that's led to an increase in bids for construction project, or for the construction of projects. So that is something that we're kind of monitoring, and they've kind of helped us try to estimate how much impact that will have in the future. It's a little hard to know, obviously, but we have been working with them on that. And then for bicycle pedestrian projects, we did have a couple of specific stakeholder meetings. I know some of the people on this committee were actually involved in those meetings, and they were able to give us some additional feedback about where projects might be located, what might be good places to put trails, especially. That was one of the primary focuses of those discussions. So we got some good feedback about that. And then for transit projects, as I mentioned previously on the last slide, we did work mostly with City Bus on that. So again, that was our primary source for that. And they were able to give us some good information on their available funding that they think they will have and how much they think it will cost to replace buses, put in the CNG infrastructure, all those sorts of things that I mentioned previously. So that's kind of where we stand with those, but I would, again, pause here to take any questions.
Larry Rose again. On your highway projects, one of the things that we discovered is you can't have overhead wires over the tree lawns on your highways because you can't plant trees there. So you can't take out the carbon dioxide emissions from the automobiles if you got those overhead wires. They got to be removed and buried.
Yeah, so that type of utility coordination that you're speaking about is something that is very important. And I think we've kind of seen a shift to that type of philosophy that you're talking about recently, at least in some areas. And certainly that's something that does kind of tend to take some time. So that the one small downside of that is that when that kind of work needs to be done, the utility companies often have to spend some time to do that. So as well as, of course, there's some cost to burying that, but it really is much better for everything if utilities can be buried. So we've tried to hold to that philosophy.
You
but
might
that's a
want
very
to
good point.
include a utility corridor, which would be like a 3 foot by 3 foot cube with about 36 holes in it, and each hole would represent a utility. One of the hole would be for telephone. That way they wouldn't have to dig up the road or dig up the tree lawns or dig up the sidewalks. Makes life a lot simpler. Get a utility corridor. In your planning efforts, that is.
Yes, thank you. That's
Because right now you got the drunken sailors
strategy.
putting their optic lines down the middle of a tree lawn, and you can't do anything with it.
Did we have any other questions or comments before we move on to the next slide?
Nothing on Facebook or YouTube right now.
Okay, so then
You're muted here, Tim.
sorry about that. Thank you for pointing that out. So the next thing we talked about was the INDOT project list. So this one is a little bit trickier in that it requires some coordination with INDOT. So there has been a change in philosophy from previous plans. So in this plan, INDOT has requested that we include what they call committed projects only. So these are projects that they know that they have the financial resources to be able to construct. And so as such, that'll kind of shorten the time horizon for when we can put projects in there. So you won't see projects that'll be worked on, 20 years in the future. It's more projects that'll be 5 to 10 years in the future, perhaps. So because of that, we've kind of been working with INDOT to try to figure out how to get that information in the plan. So like I said, we used to kind of do it differently. We used to just basically put in all types of projects, kind of regardless of how long they might take to get put in place. It was a very sort of high level exercise, but INDOT has requested that we move away from that philosophy. So that's something that we are trying to, again, figure out how to get the information in there for the plan. So in order to discuss this, we held a coordination meeting, not only with INDOT, but also with our planning partners at the Federal Highway Administration, the Federal Transit Administration, to kind of discuss how they wanted to approach this, because like I said, this is a new sort of philosophy that they have. So anytime you're changing what you've historically done for the past several of these plans that we put together, we wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page with that. We are still waiting on some project information from them. I've had some good correspondence with my contacts, specifically at INDOT, and we're hoping that we can get that information this week so that we can work on kind of getting some project descriptions and some of the other information in the plan that needs to get in there so that people can kind of know what the projects are. And again, with INDOT, that just takes some coordination. So that's why the INDOT project list isn't quite as far along as the project lists that we have where we're able to just work with our local government engineers on. So I wanted to kind of just point that out to make people aware of what's going on with that. So were there any questions on this?
Nothing on Facebook and YouTube.
Okay, and I'm not hearing anybody say anything, so I will go ahead and move on. I'll go ahead and move on to our next slide. Okay, so public coordination meetings. So this is kind of our next phase. So currently we are kind of trying to wrap up some of the things that I've highlighted in this presentation. So the project list, some of the specific planning sections, but we would like to take some of this information to the public for their feedback. So these meetings are likely to take place in April, probably late April. So what we're looking at right now is where to hold meetings. So we are evaluating several different sites, and what we're trying to do with this is we're trying to find sites that will cover a wide range of the population. So, you know, we know that there are people that, of course, live in different parts of the community, people that visit different parts of the community, and so we want to make sure that we're kind of spreading out where we hold these meetings, and we're not just kind of sticking to, you know, the downtown area, you know, our government building. We don't want to just make it that's the only place where people can come to talk about this. So some of the locations we're considering include the public libraries, community centers, those types of places. We know that our partners at REC recently had a meeting in West Lafayette at one of their new facilities that was pretty successful from what I heard. So that might be another potential place where we can reach out to and see if we can schedule a meeting. So then I think kind of the next thing to look at with this is, you know, how we kind of advertise this, how we reach out to people, how we let them know about this. So certainly we will be advertising this. We will be posting this on our social media sites. We will be posting physical notices about these as well, so that, you know, people who may not be as interested in looking on, you know, the internet for this type of information can still find it and be able to be aware of these meetings and opportunities to coordinate with us on this. But I would like to open up the floor if anybody has any suggestions about groups to contact that can help just spread the word, is what I'm looking for. So I would open up the floor at this time for suggestions on groups that can help us spread the word about these meetings.
This is Gene. The neighborhood associations would be one place to try to coordinate information through. And I'm not sure if you guys use Nextdoor, but that's a way to get to a lot of the neighborhoods.
Yes, that's a very good point, Gene. Nextdoor is one of the primary sources that we use for reaching out and advertising. But you're right. Yeah, we have had some successful engagement from using Nextdoor. So I think your point definitely stands. That's a valuable platform as we found.
Okay, we have a comment on Facebook. George Biddles asks, have you reached out to the schools? They might have a big stake in the plans.
So I'm assuming talking about people from the administration and that sort of thing. So we haven't necessarily specifically reached out to them and included them in some of the other coordination efforts like we have with state DOTs and such. But we do generally talk to them as part of the planning process. So for example, you know, we've been in communication with Tippecanoe School Corporation about providing transportation and how to handle that, especially around some of the developing areas, like, you know, around the schools by Harrison, Battleground, Burnett Creek, you know, that area. So providing transportation for that, as well as we do have an upcoming pedestrian safety project around McCutcheon and Mayflower Mill. So we've been doing some work on that. And then of course there is a Teal Road project, which is an NDOT project, but that project does get pretty close to Jeff High School. So they've been involved in the coordination from that perspective. So there has been some reaching out to them and some coordination with them through that mechanism.
Okay, George Biddles has a comment saying they might have facilities where you could hold forums.
Yes, thank you, George. That is a good point.
This is Deanna. Do any biking groups exist on campus?
On campus, I believe there is a Purdue cycling club. I have
Mhm.
not had too much success with reaching out to them. I have had just more success in developing contacts with other local cycling groups. So like the Wabash River Cycling Club,
Mhm.
Bicycle Lafayette. For whatever reason, I've been able just to get more contact from those folks. I don't know why that is, but that's the ones that have been the most responsive in the past, at least.
Well, you might contact the provost, whoever it is, because that would be something tied into student services, and that would probably allow you to post some physical advertisement on campus. I don't know how many students are on campus, but they would definitely benefit from making it more walkable.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Deanna.
Also, did you try Ivy Tech?
As a place to meet, you mean?
As a place to meet, and with the administration to provide a forum for the students to give comments on the projects or potential projects?
So the short answer is yes and no. So we've kind of established a list of people that we want to reach out to, but we don't have any locations firmly secured yet.
Okay.
So we're still kind of in the planning process for this and trying to figure out, who would allow us to hold meetings, so to speak. But yeah, the Purdue and Ivy Tech are on our list, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, and if you go to the provost, they would have access to meeting spaces and be able to advertise it as a potential either student service or something where the students could comment.
Hey Tim, this is Amy, Kristen Preston. I usually, whenever I have a recycling event, I usually email the township trustees as well as town managers or town treasurers to let the sort of rural areas know about events going on. So that could be a way to get the word out.
Yes, that is a great point. Thank you, Amy. We do have some of those folks on our contact list. We actually do send them some of the information for this meeting. So we do have some of their contacts information. So
That comment about the public schools also made me wonder if it would actually be valuable to try to target some students that walk or bike to school. I'm not sure if town meeting would be the right, way to reach them, but maybe a survey or a survey that parents could fill out about how their kids get to school.
yeah, that's an interesting idea. That could be something that we can definitely explore in the future, developing a survey. Yes, thank you.
Okay, we have another comment on Facebook from George Biddles. Aaron Madrid is still listed as coordinator of alternative transportation at Purdue. You could reach out to him. He helped with developing the bikeways on campus.
Yes, thank you. That's a good comment. I do have Aaron's contact info, and we have coordinated on a few projects in the past, actually. But yeah, so that is a very good person. He is a very good person. Yes, thank you.
I have two comments before you close.
Sure, go ahead.
On South Street, we need more roundabouts. There's too many stoplights, about 20 to get from I-65 to the Wabash River. That's too many stop and goes, waste of gas. The other thing is you might want to look at Union Street. It was cut off when they put I-65 in, and that would make a good entrance into West Lafayette going down Union Street.
Okay, thank you. Those are both things that are good suggestions, I think. So thank you for mentioning those.
It doesn't have to be a clover leaf. It could just be exit off of from Indianapolis. That way you miss South Street completely.
Hey, Tim, I got a quick question. Where do you guys usually hang up flyers for events?
Yes, so we kind of have a list of locations that we post them. So they are public places. So like the libraries, we do post one in the Tippecanoe County office building. Community centers is another place that we post notices. And we have in the past even been able to partner with local businesses that have like, community bulletin board type of things. And so we have had some success with that as well.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more comments on Facebook or YouTube at this time.
I do have one more comment. If you're interested in having your I-65 interchanges adopted, NDOT has to change their policy from allowing industry to adopt the interchange. Right now, it's only 1 year, and that's not long enough for an industry to redevelop an interchange and plan it and landscape it and make it attractive.
Yeah, interchanges are a whole different animal sometimes, and that
Yeah, we could have a
absolutely requires a
Subaru
lot of coordination.
interchange, Alcoa interchange, or
Mhm.
not Alcoa anymore, but Caterpillar interchange. But they have, right now, the policy is only the municipalities can adopt them, not businesses. It's just a poor policy. The Chamber of Commerce has about 20 drawings of how the interchanges could look through the Purdue landscape class.
All right, well, yes, thank you for that comment. Did we have any other comments or questions?
I don't see any at this time.
Okay, thank you for checking on that, Aria. So
There's
with that,
one
that
more,
does.
one
Oh, yeah,
more
go ahead,
too,
go ahead.
if you want to have your road, if you come down Schuyler Avenue, instead of making the turn on North 15th, if you just continue parallel with the railroad tracks, you can pick up. That road extends from Greenbush, and that would give you quicker access to West Lafayette off of I-25. But you'd have to do some condemnation to buy some land.
Okay, so just to kind of go ahead then and move on in our agenda, we didn't really have anything else that we wanted to present to you, but we do always have kind of a time when we have a just open floor for other questions, comments, and suggestions. I know we've kind of perhaps gotten into that part of the meeting a little bit, but I do want to again make sure that I provide the opportunity for anyone who might have had something that they're thinking about that they haven't shared yet but would like to share. So just again, we'll go ahead and open up the floor for any other questions, comments, and suggestions about any item related to transportation in the community.
Excuse me, Tim, I'm sorry to interrupt. I have another business meeting. I'm still at work. So do we need to vote on the acceptance of the projects that you just went through?
No, this was kind of an informational item, but thank you for bringing up that question. That is a good question.
Okay, anything else that we know that we're gonna have to vote on?
No.
Okay, all right, so I hate to get off early since we meet so infrequently, but I gotta go back to work.
Well, of course, we understand. Thank you so much for being able to join us tonight, and thank you for your participation. We appreciate it, Deanna.
Take care, thank you, bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
Okay. So I'm seeing no new comments here on Facebook or YouTube.
Okay, so with that, I will just go ahead and mention then that we are probably just about ready to adjourn, but since we did have a couple people join after I took roll call, I want to make sure that I got those who did join. So Larry Rose, I got you as joining after I took roll call, and then Amy Kristen Presson.
Yep.
Okay, and is there anybody who wasn't here when I took roll call that I missed? Okay, I'll take that as a no. So thank you everyone for showing up
Tim?
tonight. Oh, yeah, go
Tim?
ahead.
I've been on trails where they had music on the trail where they'll have like a small band shell or shelter, restrooms, and they'll have entertainment there so people who are walking can stop, rest, and listen to a band.
Yeah, that's a very interesting idea. Certainly providing.
It perpetuates walking and people using the trail.
Yeah, absolutely. Providing those types of amenities definitely, I think, makes trails more attractive, and especially as relevant as we talked about, connecting the trails earlier. If we have people taking longer trips, then providing spots for people to rest, I think becomes increasingly valuable. Not that it already wasn't valuable, but I think maybe adds just a little bit of extra value. So that's a good point, yes. Okay, so with that, I think we'll go ahead and get ready to adjourn the meeting. I would like to mention just when we're meeting next, which will be June 8th. We will also meet September 14th and December 14th. So those will be our remaining quarterly meetings for this year. And by the June meeting, we should pretty well be on our way to adopting the Metropolitan Transportation Plan formally. So I would encourage you all, if you're available, to try to make it to these public coordination meetings. Once we get those finalized, we will be sending out information to everyone on our mailing list, as well as posting it in some of the locations that we talked about earlier. So be on the lookout for that. And if you do have questions about that or anything else I covered tonight specifically, please do feel free to email or call us. Probably email, I would guess, would be the easiest way for most of you. That email is just apc@tippecanoe.in.gov. And you can put Metropolitan Transportation Plan in the subject line. But even if you don't remember that and you just kind of describe your question, it'll get to us eventually. We have someone kind of check that and filter through those, and it'll get to me at some point. So just wanted to mention that as kind of a future opportunity. So with that, if there are no objections, we will adjourn, but I will hold for any last comments.
Okay, yep, just one last comment here. On Facebook, George Biddle says, I think that's a great amenity suggestion, but security can be a concern.
Yep, and I think that goes back to our discussion earlier about lighting and that sort of thing. So, but good points. Thank you again all for your feedback. It's much appreciated.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, Jim Beatty. I've been on YouTube and on the phone, so
Oh, okay.
you can put me on. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, Jim. Glad to hear from you. All
I
right.
see no
So,
comments on Facebook or YouTube.
okay. So with that, I think we are ready to adjourn. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight virtually, and be on the lookout for more information. Everybody have a great evening, and we'll talk to you in a few months.
Thank you.